Revealed, how a stranded billionaire's amazing rescue of a hidden black woman led to TRANSFORMAT. Nathaniel Drake, the epitome of success at 42, never imagined a routine flight would skew into chaos. As his private jet sputtered dangerously, multiple warnings flashing through the cockpit, Nathaniel's heart raced. With millions resting on his shoulders, the thought of crashing felt like an echo of every ruthless deal he'd made, a sudden collapse he couldn't afford. His mind raced. What would they say about him? A billionaire brought low by mechanical malfunctions. The thought nauseated him. When the jet wobbled and finally touched down in a small Midwestern town, he was left feeling invulnerable yet fragile. How could he, Nathaniel Drake, a titan of the tech industry, find himself here? Seeking help, he found comfort in an unassuming community, where the buzz of life hummed through streets filled with unsold dreams, a stark contrast to the exclusive boardrooms and swanky parties he had dominated. The further he walked into town, the more his sense of isolation intensified, the rush of adrenaline chilly against his skin. That isolation deepened when he stumbled upon Alexis, a local artist with an undeniable passion. Watching her paint, Nathaniel was captivated not just by her talent but by a spirit forged in struggle. He approached cautiously, a stranger with walls built from wealth. The initial exchanges left him feeling unmoored, unsure of his own motives. Did he want to help her, or was he merely seeking redemption for a life driven by ambition? The familiar ambition began to feel cumbersome, tightening his chest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he returned to thoughts of Alexis, Nathaniel felt torn. He envisioned using his influence to bring her art into the limelight, to help her gain the recognition she deserved. Yet he also feared repercussions. Whispers would spread, the local elites wary of an outsider dangling his wealth over their beloved community. What if she rejected his help, seeing it as a thinly veiled attempt to erase his sprawling past? And then there was his family history, a web of privilege twisted with threads of exploitation. Nathaniel's ancestors had played a role in injustices. What if the community, still grappling with the echo of those wrongs, saw him as part of that lineage rather than as a potential ally? He felt an urgency building in his chest, a desperate drive to prove himself worthy of her trust, the stakes far beyond a mere business deal. As Alexis prepared to unveil her latest work, tension spiraled. He could almost hear the ticking clock echoing their struggles for acceptance. He stood at the precipice of an ugly truth, both their futures entwined in this moment as chaos loomed. Would he step into the light, or turn away and fade back into the shadows of a past he couldn't escape? The impending reveal threatened to shatter their fragile bond, forcing them both to confront their identities amid the criticism. The gallery promised to be a crucible of their struggle, testing the very fabric of who they were and who they hoped to become. The evening air in the gallery was thick with anticipation, shrouding Nathaniel in an atmosphere both intoxicating and suffocating. He surveyed the room filled with local art enthusiasts and critics, their murmurs creating a backdrop that snaked through his thoughts, amplifying his doubts. Here he stood, poised to influence a world he had long since mastered, yet utterly foreign in this context. Would his presence overshadow Alexis's moment, or could it elevate her talent? Each step towards her display felt like trudging through an unfamiliar landscape, one filled with hidden pitfalls and the unsettling echoes of whispered judgment. As guests eagerly examined her work, he sensed their hesitations, their glances darting toward him, questioning the motives of the affluent outsider. It was an instinctual fear, a protective response he had learned to navigate in his corporate life, but felt wholly unprepared to confront now that he focused his gaze on Alexis, whose brushstrokes screamed resilience and hope. The colors danced together in a fierce celebration of culture, a direct contrast to the polished monotone of his own world. For the first time, it struck him that this was not simply about promoting talent but igniting a social conversation he had consciously avoided for years. Nathaniel wrestled with the emerging emotions, his purpose under a harsh spotlight. Are you ready? Her voice cut through the noise, live with a blend of excitement and anxiety. She stood before him, anxiety shadowing her features. In her eyes, he saw the potential for both buoyancy and despair. Ready or not, this is your night, he managed, his own heart leaping to join her hopeful gaze. Yet, what if she had misread his support? The last thing he wanted was to undermine the authenticity of her work through a display of his wealth. As she unveiled her latest piece, a vision of strength embodied through vibrant hues and poignant imagery, gasps rippled through the crowd. They were captivated. A tangible wave of emotion surged, filled with admiration and disbelief. Nathaniel watched as people began to shift their focus, drawn into the inner landscape Alexis had crafted with such fervor, yet, amid the applause, Nathaniel's unease festered. With every cheer, thoughts crowded in: would they come to see her as a true artist or merely as a discoverer of the elite? It became increasingly clear, Nathaniel was not just a financier or a supporter. He had become part of the narrative, embedded in the eyes of the spectators as they scrutinized the tapestry of her life against the backdrop of his privilege. I can't do this without you, Alexis whispered, her voice heavy but resolute, the weight of her thoughts needing no embellishment. This isn't just a showcase. This is my voice. The intensity of that declaration cut through him like a dagger. It inspired and terrified him in equal measure. This wasn't an industry he could master with a financial edge or risk tolerance. This was art, raw and unfiltered, tangled with emotions not easily charted or predicted. Without hesitation, he nodded, but in that surrender, a profound realization gripped him. Helping Alexis meant relinquishing a part of himself, walking away from the safety of being just a billionaire and stepping into the messy domain of advocacy, where his past could no longer conceal him. This was a painful metamorphosis, unraveling layers of naivety he had buried beneath years of ambition. Would he have the strength to fight for her voice while confronting the uncomfortable legacy of his own? As the room erupted in applause, Nathaniel felt the knight's armor of his corporate identity crack beneath the weight of their expectations. Behind the applause hid the silent apprehension of his true self, compelling him to confront the prejudice that had shaped his life thus far. As Alexis's star soared, would he find the courage to reshape his identity from one rooted in wealth to one embodied by genuine connection? The path forward loomed uncertain, laden with choices he could no longer ignore. As they exchanged a knowing glance, both understood that their next steps would challenge everything they believed. Would Nathaniel embrace the complexity of this newfound alliance, or would he falter, retreating into the shadows of his past? The weight of choice settled heavily between them, teetering on the edge of irrevocable change. Amid the lingering applause, Nathaniel's thoughts raced like wildfire, consuming every ounce of rational clarity. He watched Alexis bask in the glowing warmth of acknowledgement, her spirit alive in the thrill of recognition. Strangely, her triumph felt elusive, as though it were a flame flickering just out of reach. It became increasingly apparent, this was not merely her moment, it was a transformative juncture for him too. He scanned the sea of faces, unaware that their admiration for Alexis was interlaced with scrutiny directed at him. What were they whispering? Did they see him as merely a benefactor or a true collaborator in her journey? The intricacies of perception cocooned him in unease. Could he rise above the architectural distractions of privilege and forge a connection with her community that felt authentic? Encouraged by Alexis's glowing smile, Nathaniel forced himself forward, his hand instinctively seeking hers. As their fingers intertwined, the warmth shot through him, a grounding force amid the chaos swirling around. You were incredible, he said, unable to mask the depth of genuine admiration flooding his voice. Thank you, but it's only just begun, she replied, her gaze radiating a mix of commitment and expectation. Nathaniel realized then that he stood on the precipice of something far more profound than artistic promotion. He was meriting the weight of his position, becoming a conduit rather than an obstacle in amplifying her voice. Driven by a newfound urgency, he headed towards the gallery exit, beckoning Alexis to follow. They stepped into the cool night air, leaving behind the buzz of the celebration but not the questions looming in Nathaniel's mind. What's next for you? Do you have a plan? he asked, urgency threading through his tone. Next. Alexis turned, a flicker of surprise lighting her face. Next, I bring these stories to a broader audience. I want to talk about community, culture, and resilience. They're part of me, but I need to make them part of the conversation. Her fervor was infectious, igniting a flame of purpose within Nathaniel. But alongside it simmered an unnerving fear. The specter of his past loomed heavily, its shadow casting doubts on his every aspiration to be genuine. I'm in, he stated, heart pounding. Let us collaborate on something that truly reflects your vision. Together? She asked, skepticism tugging at her brows. Yes, I'll help in any way you need, financial backing, networking, anything. It's time to step out of my comfort zone. The admission tasted foreign, yet liberating. Each word carried its own weight, and Nathaniel felt the flicker of potential ignite. This journey with Alexis could genuinely transform both their lives. Yet deep within, Nathaniel wrestled with an escalating anxiety. The notion of vulnerability, of exposing his complexities to scrutiny, rattled him. Would he be able to face the uncomfortable realities of his privilege, the systemic barriers he had perpetuated? Questions clawed at him like ivy, begging for attention. A plan began to form, a desire to host discussions showcasing not just painting but the stories behind each piece. To intertwine his name, once an embodiment of a cold empire, with narratives of culture and resilience. It would mean opening up his world to criticisms he shied away from, confronting the backlash from those who would see him as a mere parasite on genuine talent. As they stood beneath the stars, an electrifying awareness settled in the air. Nathaniel's heart was racing, both in anticipation and fear. I want to use what I have to elevate your work and amplify voices, he asserted, feeling the tremor of vulnerability rise again. But I have to be willing to be open about my past. Is that too much? Alexis studied him, her brows knitting together thoughtfully. Being open gives more power than you realize. Embracing your past might be the key to forging authentic connections. The warmth in her voice soothed the tempest inside him yet heightened the stakes of what lay ahead. Nathaniel felt a flicker of hope intertwined with trepidation. He was descending into uncharted waters. Could he truly step outside the cocoon of his wealth? As the path ahead grew darker and less defined, he grappled with his articulation of success no longer measured solely in profits, but in connections, stories, and hopes shared. The night was a tapestry of possibilities stretching before them. He felt ready to embrace that journey, though the magical embrace of uncertainty loomed larger than any financial report. Would Nathaniel discover the strength and authenticity to reshape his identity and tackle the staggering privilege he held, or would fear compel him to retreat yet again into the confines of his guarded existence? Their conversation would lead them deeper, but as he held Alexis's gaze, a realization dawned: this was merely the cusp of their journey. The moment of truth was accelerating toward them with blinding speed, pivoting toward a precarious future that would test every part of who he was becoming. As dawn broke, Nathaniel stood in his studio, surrounded by canvases waiting to be painted. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust dancing in the air. He huffed in frustration, mind racing with the enormity of his commitment to Alexis. Her words replayed in his head like a mantra: community, culture, resilience, and each iteration left a bitter aftertaste. The gallery's applause had faded, yet the questions lingered like the scent of oil paint, sharp and unyielding. Who was he in this endeavor? More importantly, who had he been? With each stroke of his brush on the canvas, the same doubts gnawed at him. Was this a genuine partnership, or was he wielding his privilege to curate a narrative that set him at the center of a story he could never fully grasp? His mind darted back to the conversations he and Alexis had shared during the brief walk home. Their exchanges were electric, but laden with unspoken fears. What if he failed? What if his attempts to support her only exacerbated the very disparities he sought to address? Driven by unrest, Nathaniel grabbed a notebook and began jotting down his thoughts, the first glimmer of a plan taking shape. He envisioned engaging local leaders, artists, and community members' faces Alexis had emphasized were critical to her stories. He realized this journey wasn't merely about showcasing her talents, it demanded vulnerability, his vulnerability. The entire enterprise could unravel if he didn't stay true to her narrative, allowing her to take the lead. Still, apprehension clenched around his chest. Could he resist the urge to inject himself into the spotlight? Would others regard him as a puppet master, pulling strings behind the scenes, focused on preserving his image rather than crafting a platform for genuine expression? Nathaniel knew he had to confront these fears head-on. Hooking the threads of his privilege meant being aware, being honest, determined. Nathaniel reached for his phone. The thought of reaching out to Alexis ahead of their next meeting filled him with a mix of excitement and dread. This wasn't about orchestrating an interaction, it had to be a collaboration based on trust and respect. He hesitated but finally typed a message. "Can we meet today? I have some ideas, but I need your input." Moments later, he received a response, "Absolutely. Let's make it happen." As he paced the studio, the walls closing in momentarily, Nathaniel challenged himself to eliminate distractions. He allocated a time to reflect on what his past had taught him about disparity and race. He would run through the shame, the ignorance, and the privilege he had previously taken for granted. Each experience could serve as a stepping stone toward change, both personally and for those like Alexis, who deserved to be seen. Through significant internal growth, he resolved to explore feelings he had buried for too long. Recognizing his failings was essential. It could propel him into action and perhaps enable him to forge deeper connections. As he prepared for his meeting with Alexis, a sense of determination began to replace anxiety. The murmurs of self-doubt persisted, yet he resolved to embrace them rather than let them dictate his path. He wanted this to be a space where they both could challenge the narratives defined for them by outsiders. This would redefine success not as an isolated achievement but as the shared victory of voices formerly relegated to silence. In the shower, the steam curled around him, transforming the air into a warm, soothing haze. He could visualize the discussions blossoming between him and Alexis, shedding light on the stories woven into every piece she created. He wouldn't just be an enthusiastic backer, he would immerse himself fully in the experiences she shared. His decision to dive deep into an unfamiliar world came with stakes he could hardly fathom. And yet, the uncertainty energizing him suggested that something significant was on the horizon. What if he emerged not merely as a supporter but transformed into a true advocate for change? The exhilaration of this thought fueled his confidence as he headed toward the meeting, but beneath the surface, a tension remained. Was he ready to confront the shadows of his past? The implications of this journey were colossal, but perhaps the most formidable challenge would arise from the confrontation he had so long avoided, the confrontation with himself. As he approached the cafe for their meeting, Nathaniel's heart quickened. In those first moments, would he discover the courage to embrace vulnerability, or would fear once again lead him astray? Nathaniel entered the cafe, the welcoming aroma of coffee mingling with the crisp morning air, yet a palpable weight lingered on his chest. Each step toward their table felt heavier, his thoughts circling like caged birds, desperate for freedom. He spotted Alexis seated by the window, her hands cradling a steaming mug, a tapestry of ideas flickering in her expressive eyes. She looked up, a spark igniting between them as their gazes locked. "Hey, Nate," she called with an easy smile, a warmth that momentarily lifted the fog around him. He forced a smile in return, but caution gnawed at his thoughts. Would this meeting become another instance where he faltered in the face of intimacy, convinced that his privilege would contradict the authenticity of her narrative? As he settled across from her, the energy shifted. "What's on your mind?" she prompted, her tone genuine and inviting. Nervousness coursed through him. This felt like the beginning of an uncharted territory, yet every instinct warned against overstepping the boundaries of their fragile partnership. "I've been thinking about how to shape this project," he began, his voice steadying as ideas spilled forth. He spoke of local artists, community leaders, alliances rooted in solidarity rather than dominance. With each word he uttered, an undercurrent of urgency ran through him, pressing against the walls of his carefully constructed identity. Could this truly encompass the voices of people like Alexis, or was he merely repackaging their stories with his gloss? Alexis's brow furrowed slightly, and for a heartbeat, Nathaniel's heart sank. Had he miscalculated? I love those ideas, she replied, her enthusiasm palpable. But we need to focus more on what these stories mean for us, individually. It's about the journey, not just claiming a narrative. Her words, sharp yet encouraging, rekindled his determination. Each concept he presented navigated uncomfortably close to the shadow of his privilege, and this concerned him deeply. He reflected on how often he had hijacked conversations, unintentionally eclipsing the voices he aimed to uplift. Did he want recognition as a white ally or genuine rapport with those who lived these experiences every day? How do I step back while still being a conduit for the stories that need to be told? He asked, vulnerability slipping into his tone. The admission hung in the air, colors swirling like paint on a palette, each hue representing a different layer of his self-identity. Alexis leaned in, her gaze just as penetrating. It's about listening, Nate. Really listening. Being present in the conversations without trying to mold them into something palatable for others. He recognized the wisdom in her words and felt a fire ignite within him, merging despair with hope. There was beauty in the act of listening, a strength that required consistent effort. For so long, he had existed as a spectator. Now he realized he must evolve into an active participant who could face the uncomfortable truths that came along with it. As the dialogue unfolded, they delved deeper, exploring both painful realities and aspirations. Nathaniel found himself opening up about his past and upbringing nestled within privilege's embrace, yet marked by moments of ignorance and misconception. This unveiling felt foreign, yet liberating. Each story Alexis shared chipped away at the once impenetrable walls surrounding his awareness. The conversation raced through revelations, hitting peaks of understanding, yet still haunted by the specter of doubt that lingered in his heart. Was he changing, or merely fragmenting into a version of himself that fit the narrative he chose to adopt? Nathaniel's internal conflict deepened, evident in the way his fingers drummed anxiously on the table, the rhythm counterpoint to the vibrant exchanges shared with Alexis. Nate, where's all this coming from? Alexis suddenly asked, tilting her head inquisitively. The question sliced deep, prompting a wave of trepidation to crest within him. He had been exposed, stripped of the performance he had rehearsed with. Elegance. What lay beneath the layers of this pursuit? Could he truly emerge as a champion for her voice? There was a fear lurking in the silence, a realization that his journey required more than just support. It required ongoing introspection and action. Nathaniel's chest tightened as he considered how to answer. Would he be prepared for the vulnerability she craved? To confront his limitations and navigate through uncertainties while seeking authenticity? But beneath the tension, a thrilling possibility surged to life. What if, through confronting these internal barriers, he could unearth the true worth of interconnected stories? Just as he was about to respond, a loud crash reverberated through the cafe, a jolt breaking the tension. All eyes turned toward the source, and in that moment, Nathaniel felt a shift in the atmosphere, a new layer being woven into the fabric of their meeting. He would face whatever lay ahead, but now the need for clarity surged within him. Could he step beyond the limitations he created? What would this unexpected turbulence reveal about him on the path they were forging together? The sound of shattered glass and startled gasps scattered Nathaniel's focus. He turned towards the commotion, heart racing. A barista had accidentally dropped a tray of mugs, sending a few teetering tables into chaos. The momentary crisis drew the attention of everyone, including Alexis, who offered Nathaniel a fleeting smile before redirecting her focus on the commotion. It was a trivial incident, yet it had shattered the rare moment of deep connection they had just shared. He took a breath, attempting to grasp the remnants of their conversation before chaos collided with clarity. How could he articulate the vulnerabilities she had unearthed just before the disruption? Before the clamor faded, Nathaniel recognized that this minor incident reflected a larger pattern in his life, moments of disruption often raining down on opportunities to break through to authentic growth. Turning back toward Alexis, he searched her expression, a mixture of concern and amusement. Sorry about that, she said, chuckling lightly, her laughter a balm on his frayed nerves. As the noise receded and order began to restore itself, Nathaniel felt an urgency swell within him. Alexis, he blurted out, propelled by the strength of her earlier encouragement. I suddenly feel like I need to really unpack everything, how I fit into this, how my journeys have intersected with yours. I've always been the one meticulously crafting narratives, but this feels different. I want to explore not just the stories, but the meanings we extract from them. Shifting closer, she listened intently. That's a powerful realization, Nate. Digging deeper isn't easy, especially when it forces you to confront those uncomfortable truths. I'm beginning to see that. I spent so long building this facade of control and competence, trying to avoid exposing any fragility. It's easier to adopt a persona than to let others see the real me. Who was that persona, Nathaniel? Her question struck him squarely in the gut. Who had he decided to become in lieu of facing his internal contradictions? Before he could form a response, the thought flooded in, accompanied by a distinct fear. What if the persona he had crafted was merely another layer of privilege, a shield against the vulnerability that he now craved? This spiraled into confounding emotions, shifting from self-doubt to an emerging determination to become more than just the dispassionate observer he had played for too long. I just want to be honest with myself and the stories I aim to uplift, he murmured, the determination in his voice growing. How do I do that while acknowledging my privileges? How do I make sure I am contributing rather than consuming? Alexis placed her hand over his, her warmth igniting a flicker of strength. It starts with recognition. Acknowledging those privileges, but also accepting that part of your journey incorporates looking at how those privileges can be used to elevate others, without absorbing their narratives as your own. It's tricky, but it's essential. Nathaniel felt the warmth of her hand. It resonated deeper than words. There was a time when he thought vulnerability equated to weakness, but in her presence, he began to see profound strength rooted in authenticity. A realization dawned: his past struggles were not burdens, they were layers of a complex identity that required exploration, not suppression. As he contemplated her words, his gaze drifted beyond their table to the bustling cafe. Each engaged conversation among patrons seemed to represent a different story, a different perspective. He had been too focused on the rigidity of his own tale to appreciate the vibrant tapestry of others around him. Just then, the door swung open from a gust of cold air, ushering in a new patron. The sudden shift startled Nathaniel. It reminded him that life moves forward, with or without his acceptance. He recognized the parallel he needed to keep moving forward in embracing his own complexity. So what's next? Alexis asked, jolting him out of his reverie. The anticipation in her voice coaxed him into a realm he had previously feared. How do you want to dig deeper? Without truly knowing how he would navigate it, an idea began to crystallize. What if I start writing? Each encounter, each conversation could lead to new reflections. The thought felt poignant, liberating. Rather than being a mere collector of stories, he could become a medium of transformation, weaving together the verses of his life with those of others. Writing could be powerful, Alexis noted, intrigue rippling through her expression. But it's equally essential to have discussions about your insights with people who live these realities every day. Nathaniel felt alive, the spark of purpose igniting within him once more. Perhaps this unforeseen turbulence was exactly what he needed, a kickstart into a new chapter of self-discovery. Thank you for believing in me, Alexis. Thank you for not letting me hide, he said earnestly. But as the conversation continued, a shadow passed across his excitement, hinting at the uncertainty that lay ahead. He could feel the foundations of his past shifting beneath him as he prepared to navigate uncharted waters. He was ready to confront the complexities of his identity, but the question remained, would the stories he unearthed honor those whose narratives intertwined with his own, or would his efforts unravel into something he couldn't control? The very air crackled with possibilities, awaiting the moment he would gather the courage to put his intentions into action. Nathaniel's mind buzzed as he left the cafe, the weight of Alexis's words humming in the air around him. He stumbled towards his car, the chill of the evening wrapping around him, tightening the coil of urgency in his chest. As he sat behind the wheel, he glanced at his hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. Writing was merely a start, an intention hanging in the air, yes, but intention alone wouldn't bridge the gap between the person he had been and the person he aspired to be. A flicker of doubt ignited in him. What if he failed? What if his attempts to instigate change not only fell flat, but estranged him from the very stories he hoped to honor? Scolding himself for the negativity, he reminded himself that every great idea had fundamental fears at its heart, including his own. He needed to push through rather than succumb to self-sabotage. The moments at the cafe with Alexis had shown him a glimpse of vulnerability, a space where growth could flourish. Arriving home, Nathaniel poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee, indifference radiating from the kitchen that echoed his previous existence. He had spent too many nights perpetuating a curated atmosphere of success and control. Yet here he was, compelled to dismantle it layer by layer in order to speak truths buried under the surface. With a notebook sprawled open on the table, he hesitated before finding a pen. How do you start unpacking a life marked by privilege? He practiced feelings of discontent in the blankness of the page, grappling with honesty as both terrifying and liberating. Begin with the stories, he whispered to himself, remembering Alexis's insistence on dialogue. Those narratives were the intersection between himself and others' lives lived parallel yet separate from his own, waiting to be shared and understood. With determination, he wrote, "What do I know about failure?" The words drifted from his pen like an incantation, stirring an understanding that failure was not an endpoint. Moving forward demanded accountability both to himself and to those he would write about. The narrative swirled in his mind, unraveling memories of missed opportunities, of times when he could have listened instead of dictated. Each line felt like a brick laid in a new foundation of a more authentic self. After several hours, the notebook pages competed against the darkness of the room. Nathaniel's once rigid thoughts began to flow into a narrative broader than himself. Each piece served as an acknowledgement of his past, but also of the potential for connection, empathy, and, ultimately, respect for the stories that rushed forth from others. He closed the notebook, the ink now darkening the fabric of his past, a reminder that he was not the only protagonist in this journey. As he leaned back, the weariness of confronting himself pooled in his eyes. He had stepped closer to something profound. The following day, fueled by both excitement and trepidation, Nathaniel resolved to seek out the very communities whose perspectives he'd skimmed but never deeply engaged with. A chance encounter at the cafe wouldn't suffice anymore. He needed something more grounded in reality. His plans began to crystallize into a strategy. He'd approach local artists, storytellers, and community advocates. Each might illuminate voices he hadn't yet considered, perhaps even reshape his understanding of what it truly meant to listen. But there was a gnawing fear buried at the edges of his determination. What if his presence was seen as intrusive? How could he ensure his privileged identity didn't overshadow the very narratives he wanted to uplift? The clock ticked inexorably, bringing him closer to that critical moment of initiation. The thought of step one sent jolts of anxiety through him. Face the fear, he muttered, slapping a post-it note onto the wall above his desk. Acknowledgement became his mantra, a commitment to not only explore but to engage meaningfully. He would reach out. He would share. What he didn't know was how these interactions would carve deeper fissures into the comfortable life he had known. Schedule set for the following day, Nathaniel braced himself for the impending contact with those he had previously avoided. Would they welcome him? He closed his eyes, mental images jittering with potentialities. The narrative spun between complexity and beauty were now dangling before him, a vibrant tapestry, ready to be woven. And as he prepared, a thought pierced through the haze. In truly confronting the stories of others, would he lose himself in the process, or find a version of himself he had never dared to dream of before? The answer would unfold as he took the first step into the unknown. Nathaniel woke early the next day, the sunlight piercing through the curtains as if insisting on clarity. As he dressed, he could feel the weight of his previous complacency slip further away. Each piece of clothing felt like armor, a tangible representation of the steps he was about to take, steps toward engagement rather than passive observation. The day ahead shimmered with potential but also loomed heavy with uncertainty. He slid his notebook into his messenger bag, the weight of it reminding him of his unfinished thoughts and questions. What had previously been a silence filled with self-doubt had now transformed into a cacophony of voices he intended to hear. He would connect, he would listen, and above all, he would respect the lives woven intricately into the fabric of his community. As he drove through the familiar streets of his town, Nathaniel's hands on the steering wheel felt steadier than they had the night before. Each turn led him closer to places that were not only physical locations but also points of intersection with stories waiting to be told. His first stop was a community art center that a friend had mentioned, a hub bustling with creativity, a vibrant pulse he had never consciously sought out. Walking into the center, Nathaniel was greeted with vivid colors decorating the walls and the hum of conversation filling the air. His nerves tingled, thrilling and daunting. Could he truly navigate this world? Could he connect sincerely enough to be welcomed rather than seen as an intruder? The fear of being the uninvited guest loomed large, but he shook it off. Breathe, he reminded himself, pressing through the entrance. He spotted a group of artists huddled together, deep in discussion, their expressions animated. Nathaniel approached, his heart racing with each step. "Hey, is this space open for anyone?" he asked, summoning every ounce of confidence. The group turned toward him, studying his hesitant smile. One woman, tall with vibrant braids adorned with beads, smiled back. "Yeah. We're just sharing ideas for a mural. Come on over." Nathaniel's breath hitched with relief as he joined them, listening intently to their dynamic conversations. They discussed not just art, but the struggles of their community, the nuances of identity and the stories that shaped their existence. Here, Nathaniel found a part of what he had been searching for, candid discussions about vulnerability, strength, and resilience. Feeling emboldened, he spoke up, sharing his intent to write about diverse narratives. The atmosphere shifted slightly as they processed his words. He could almost see the unspoken questions forming. Why was he really here? Did he fully grasp the impact of his interest? Nathaniel held back the urge to apologize for his privilege. Instead, he focused on moments he had missed in the past, stories he had neglected. "I hope to honor your experiences, not overshadow them," he stated, his voice steady. "I realize that to listen is the first and most necessary step." Their eyes softened, the tension breaking through. They began to share fragments of their lives, tales of struggles and victories that intertwined with their art. Nathaniel was entranced, weaving through their narratives, absorbing their truths. The stories unfurled, each one challenging his existing notions, pushing him to think about the nuances he had overlooked, but as the conversations deepened, Nathaniel felt a low tide of unease rising within him. Was he truly prepared for what would come next? The very act of listening could unveil uncomfortable realizations about his own biases and assumptions. The risk of transformation was palpable. Would he maintain the newfound connections or disappear into the shadows of his previous life? As the session concluded, the vibrant energy lingered, yet a kernel of doubt nestled in his chest. Face those uncertainties, he told himself. Can you handle the truths that may lay ahead? While exchanging contact information with the artists, a moment of synchronicity sparked in Nathaniel. The fragile fabric of consciousness began to weave tighter. Perhaps this was the beginning of something not just momentary, but transformative. With the sun beginning to dip low, he climbed back into his car, a sense of resolve washing over him. Awareness felt like a double-edged sword, illuminating both the possibilities and the discomfort. His phone buzzed, and a message flashed across the screen, a response from someone he had reached out to yesterday, a local storyteller interested in discussing narratives of their urban environment. A jolt of excitement surged through him. This was the first step in what could potentially unfold into a journey of profound connections. But with the excitement came the nagging thought, could he truly bear the burden of their truths, or would they fracture him beyond repair? The answer loomed like an ominous shadow as he prepared to make the next call. Nathaniel took a breath, feeling the weight of his uncertainty settle deep in his chest as he stared at the phone. He had reached out to Grace, the storyteller, in a burst of newfound enthusiasm, but now he questioned whether he was truly adequate for this call. What if she asked him questions he couldn't answer? What if he stumbled over his words in the presence of someone so deeply embedded in the narrative landscape he yearned to explore? grappling with these thoughts, he opened his notebook, flipping through the pages filled with his jotted ideas and observations. Each word bled into the next, a chaotic orchestra of thoughts. How was he supposed to approach a life he had been a mere observer of? He dialed the number. The ringing softened as he leaned back in his seat, reminding himself that this was a learning experience. When Grace answered, her voice was warm, thrumming with a melody that filled the space, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts. "Hello, Nathaniel. I received your message. I'm curious about the kind of stories you're looking to explore," she said, easing into the conversation like a gentle tide washing over shore. She was both inviting and intimidating. "I'm interested in narratives that reflect the real experience of living here, especially those that challenge the dominant perspectives," he managed to reply, his voice steadier than he felt. "And why do those stories matter to you?" Her question penetrated deeper, demanding authenticity. Nathaniel hesitated. He could feel the pressure to articulate his motivations clearly. "Because I've avoided them for so long. I want to understand not just the surface, but the complexities that often go unspoken. I think these narratives deserve to be heard." Silence hung in the air, thick and challenging. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Was he coming off as sincere or merely an outsider pretending to be an ally? He felt the weight of his privilege looming, a constant reminder of barriers he had yet to acknowledge fully. "I appreciate your honesty, Nathaniel," Grace responded. "You know, being willing to listen is only the beginning. The integrity lies in how you wield that understanding." Her words struck a chord, resonating somewhere deep within him. He had seen too many activists take up the cause without understanding the weight of the stories they were handling. "What should I be aware of when sharing these narratives?" he asked, feeling a determined edge sharpening his curiosity. "Well," she paused, a thoughtful tone leading him into deeper reflections. "You should realize that there's power in storytelling, but also responsibility. The way you present their truths shapes perceptions and can carry consequences. You've got to tread lightly." As they spoke, Nathaniel realized this was not just a learning opportunity, it was shaping into a partnership, a mentorship. Each sentence from Grace nudged him closer towards his own convictions and fears, exposing the naivety he sometimes wore like armor. "Are you prepared to confront what you might uncover?" Grace's question pulled at him. He inhaled sharply, the air feeling charged. "I want to be prepared, but I can't guarantee that I won't falter." "Good," she replied, a spark of approval evident in her voice. "Acknowledging your limitations is a powerful first step. It's part of the journey." The conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving through personal stories, aspirations, and challenges. Nathaniel felt a growing admiration for Grace, and a flicker of trepidation regarding the stories she had hinted at sharing. After they concluded, a curious urge settled over him. He needed to meet her in person, to understand beyond the words. Yet anxiety crept back in, whispering about the unsteady territory he was venturing into. What if he interrupted someone's healing with his questions? What if he unwittingly misrepresented their experiences? As he hung up, Nathaniel remained seated, contemplating the profound nature of their exchange. This was not merely about writing, it was about understanding and respect. Each step toward deeper comprehension felt daunting yet exhilarating, and the murky waters he was wading through only became murkier. He pulled out his notebook again, a surge of inspiration pushing him to pen down the essence of the moments he just shared. As the ink flowed, he couldn't shake the thought that perhaps there was a hidden narrative brewing within him as well, one connected to his reluctance, fears, and strengths. But as he closed the notebook, a chilling realization settled in that the next conversation with Grace could very well crack open his understanding of what it meant to truly connect across layers of experience. Would he be ready for whatever truths might emerge next? With the evening sky fading into darkness, Nathaniel felt the tension pulse anew. It was time to embrace the deep and complex depths of the narrative journey ahead. The call to action was palpable, illuminating the path filled with both peril and enlightenment. Nathaniel stood in front of Alexis's newly opened gallery, the air around him buzzing with anticipation. This was not just another grand opening, it was a celebration of their collaboration, one born from vulnerability and a shared vision that went beyond mere aesthetics. He took a deep breath, inhaling both the scent of fresh paint and the weight of expectation that surrounded him. As guests filtered in, Nathaniel steeled himself. Gone were the days of lurking in the shadows of his privilege, hesitant and uncertain. He had shed that outdated persona, replacing it with something more authentic, an ally willing to uplift voices he had overlooked for far too long. Alexis had become more than just a partner, she was a mirror, reflecting the transformative power of true collaboration. The gallery walls came alive with her vibrant works depicting community stories, rich narratives brimming with emotion and strength. Nathaniel could feel the energy shift as attendees engaged with the art, their conversations echoing what he had feared and learned along this journey. Each frame was not just a showcase but a testament to resilience, something he had grown to understand deeply, even if initially it frightened him. When Alexis stepped onto the small stage to speak, her presence radiated confidence. Nathaniel's pride swelled as he watched her command the room. They had spent countless hours honing the messages that aligned their visions, ensuring that their combined efforts positioned her artistry at the forefront while uplifting the narratives that so desperately needed to be heard. He took comfort in her vision, recognizing that they were both confronting the uncomfortable truths surrounding socioeconomic divides and historical injustices head-on. "Art is our voice," she began, her voice strong and resolute. "But it must be heard through our experiences, our communities, and exchanged with the understanding and respect these stories deserve." Nathaniel felt the resonant truth of her words course through him, igniting a shared vision that bore witness to their respective transformations. After her speech, the applause that erupted felt like the echo of validation not just for Alexis, but for both of them. Nathaniel realized that the journey they had embarked upon was more than just a business venture, it had fostered an authentic connection. He found himself actively engaged in conversations with the community members who attended, eager to listen and learn rather than overshadow. This was a victory, both for Alexis and for himself. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and a sense of accomplishment enveloped the gallery, Nathaniel found Alexis amidst the remnants of the celebration. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The reception was incredible. She smiled, a mixture of relief and joy flooding her features. "We did it," she corrected gently. "We really did this together." In that moment, Nathaniel recognized the profound transformation he had undergone. He was no longer defined by his wealth, nor was he simply an outsider looking in. He was a partner who understood the importance of creating space for authenticity and shared stories, a role he felt honored to inhabit. "Thank you for trusting me," he said, his earnestness unmasked. "For challenging me. Those initial doubts, that fear of inadequacy. I feel like I've come out of this journey with a true understanding of identity and responsibility." Alexis nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and admiration. "And you've proven that privilege can be a tool for change, not a barrier. We carry the weight of our histories, but we also possess the power to reshape what that means moving forward." And at that moment, Nathaniel felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment wash over him, not in the financial sense that had once consumed him, but in a way that inspired true personal growth. He had stepped up not as the billionaire but as a catalyst for connection, empathy, and social responsibility. As they stood together in the glow of the gallery lights, Nathaniel took Alexis's hand. Their unique partnership embodied the strength found in vulnerability, the genuine empathy coursing through their journey together. He had discovered his purpose, a testament to the true essence of joy, the art of uplifting others through mutual respect and understanding. Ethically, he would approach future endeavors with renewed vigor, embodying the principles they had established together. Nathaniel dove deep into community engagement, writing articles that empowered artists and advocates, giving a voice to their narratives. He spoke openly about his journey, acknowledging his privilege while inspiring others to confront theirs. He had achieved what he once deemed impossible. He transformed not just his identity but reshaped the values guiding his life. The fears that had once paralyzed him no longer held power over him. As the evening drew to a close, Nathaniel glanced around the gallery, filled with laughter, conversations, and the vibrant hues of art. He stepped back, knowing that this was just the beginning. Together, they would continue to break barriers, foster connections, and amplify the myriad voices that compose the community tapestry. This night was no mere culmination, it was the blossoming of a new chapter, grounded in profound understanding, respect, and the courage to continue evolving into something greater. In that assurance, he found solace. He had emerged from the shadows into a light that promised new possibilities. You need to subscribe now to witness the next transformative journey that unfolds. Leave a like now to ensure that stories of personal growth and genuine connection continue to reach those who need them. Comment your thoughts and theories about this significant transformation. Your engagement shapes our community. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who seek inspiration from tales of overcoming adversity. This is the moment to show your support. Let's grow together.